This is a new day. This is a new day full of sound and light and expectation. This day has been waiting for you. This day has been waiting especially for you, to embrace you, to guide you. This day has been waiting with open arms, just for you. This is the day we have been given. Let's not waste it. Come now, and let us worship together. Welcome, everybody. My name is Reverend Joseph Boyd. It is my pleasure to welcome you live in Youngstown, Ohio, at 1105 Elm Street. Our brick-and-mortar church has been a part of the North Side, a neighborhood that has seen a lot of change in the last 40 years. And we are very proud that for over a century, we have consistently stood with the marginalized in this community, across this country, and across this world. We have put on the face of our church, facing Elm Street, a Black Lives Matter banner to remind ourselves and our community that racism and systems that support racism must transform if we are to become the beloved community. For over a decade, we have waved a rainbow flag to signify this place as a safe sanctuary for all LGBTQ+ persons. So if you come to us this morning from Youngstown, Ohio, welcome. If you come to us from anywhere in the Mahoning County, Trumbull County area, welcome. If you are tuning in from beyond Ohio or Pennsylvania, we welcome you. We know we have people viewing us from New York to California to Colorado to other states in the U.S. We also know we have some international followers in the Dominican Republic and Brazil, and the number just keeps growing. And the number of lives that our community gets to touch virtually in a safe way is just continuing to grow and grow and grow, and we are so grateful to have you be part of this community. If this is your first time viewing, or if you've been viewing us for only a few months, I would like to invite you to join the newcomer circle. That's going to be immediately following the service after the talkback. Karen Lapidus is a beloved member of our congregation who can tell you a bit more in depth about the history of this church and why we do what we do and how we do what we do, and to give you an opportunity to learn more about us and give us an opportunity to get to know you too, so that we can engage more fruitfully in conversation with each other. So please join. That's going to be immediately following the same link. Just stay on. And if you're a new person who's been around for a few months or less, please consider being part of that conversation and learning more about us and giving us a chance to learn more about you. Also, if you have children 18 and under, I want to make sure that you get the Zoom link. It's going to be down in the chat box. For kids who are in 8th grade and under, 14 and under, religious education classes are going to start at 11:30 a.m. And so if you have a child with a separate device, they can just click the link that's going to be in the chat box, and they can tune in while you're also watching service live with us. If your child is 15 to 18, that's going to start at noon, and there's a separate link for that, again, also in the chat box. There are two other events that are happening today that I wanted to bring to your attention. One is a foreign policy discussion group. Bob Siebold, who's a former diplomat who for years lived in Washington, D.C., has been a beloved member of this congregation and has been leading these conversations on foreign policy to educate us about the government in other places, in other countries, and how the U.S. has historically related to these governments. And so that foreign policy discussion is going to be at 3 p.m. today using this link, and it's open to anyone in the country, in the world. So please consider that if that's of interest to you, anything to do with international law, economics, and practice with the United States. At 7 p.m. today, we have a meditation. Linda Scharf, who's a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner, is also a member of our congregation and has been committed to holding regular meditation for people across the world. And she's done that 3 times a week. And it's just been a real boon to our community and a real boon to us during this time to learn how to sit with ourselves, to sit with our feelings, to sit with our questions and our doubts, and to sit in solidarity with people across the country, especially those who are suffering, who are ill, or being maltreated. Learning how to sit in solidarity with those people and hold that presence. So that's going to be at 7 o'clock today. And then the last announcement is that on Saturday, this coming Saturday at 11 a.m., I'm going to be holding a conversation. The theme of this month is renewal. And the class that I'll be facilitating is going to be called Renewing Our Vows. So typically when we think of renewing our vows, we may think of wedding vows or marriage vows. Another thought might be monastic vows. But I also want to extend that a bit beyond the ways that we usually think about vows or promises. For instance, the police and our public officials, they take an oath once they're sworn in, which is a kind of vow. And so I want to explore what vow or promise might support us as individuals during this time, and also what vows or promises we might want to hold up for our community as something that might be taken on as a practice. So please join me. It's going to be next Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on this channel. And now we'll go to Elizabeth White for our final announcement.
Good morning, everybody. Carrying each other through. I'm Elizabeth White, and I'm the head of UUYO's stewardship team. And carrying each other through is our theme for this year's pledge drive. We are living in precarious times, and this church has such a critical role to play to help us through. UUYO's mission is remarkably, astonishingly in alignment with the needs in our world right now. And it serves every one of us regardless of our particular circumstances or our particular means. In the last 6 months, we've adapted to serve our immediate community, the greater Youngstown community, and even the world in ways that would have been unimaginable before. I'm sure each of us has a story to share about how UUYO has touched our lives and sustained us through this time. And so this is the time of year that we revisit how we financially support the church that sustains us. So we do this by making a financial pledge, which is basically a promise of what we can contribute financially to the church in 2021. And this is how we will carry each other through. So here are the logistics, the basic logistics. The drive this year is going to run for the month of October, and it will be almost entirely virtual or online. The drive will end October 31st. This is way earlier than usual to just account for the precariousness of the situation we find ourselves in. So please mark your calendars, October 31st. Get my pledge card in. Get a tattoo if that's your thing. Just any way that you need to do to remember that is the date that we really need to know what our pledges are so we know how to set up our budget for next year. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce our stewardship team this year. There are 4 of us. So Trudy, I can't see everybody, but Trudy Weatherby. I hope you're waving, Trudy. There she is. Lenore Jones is also on the team, and Sarah Lown. So we are a small and mighty team, and we have undertaken the really huge task of reaching out to everybody to set up a drive that's unlike anything we've ever done before. So right now we are trying to reach everybody by phone. We've been calling, there are over 100 of you to reach. We're calling you to tell you how it's going to go this year and to ask you 2 things. One is to participate in a 1-hour Zoom meeting that will take place in October. There will be 9 to choose from. And accommodations will be made for a small number of people who do not have that access and need to meet in person in a socially distanced setting instead. So we are making those accommodations. The second thing we're asking, which I've already said, is to make sure your pledge card is turned in by the 31st. You don't have a pledge card yet, you will get a pledge card, but just remember the deadline. Anyway, what my big ask today is to please be available. If you get a call and you just get a message, please call the person back. If you get an email, please call the person back. We can't go chasing everybody down in coffee hour. We can't reach you in other ways. We're trying to work within the limitations that we have right now. And we are the sole supporters of this amazing church. And it's viewers like you who we count on to make it happen. Nobody else, nobody else funds us. It all comes from us. So thank you. Please consider carrying each other through. And in the words of our wise leader, paraphrased, these are the times we have been given. Let's not waste them. Thank you.
For our chalice sliding today, I want to introduce a word to you. It's a word I've never heard before. Perhaps you have. The word is respair. Respair. And perhaps Andy can put it down in the chat box. It's R-E-S-P-A-I-R, respair. If, like me, you've never heard of this word before, don't feel bad. It's an Old English word that basically went out of use in the 15th century. But I'll tell you why I introduced the word. Respair, the definition, is the introduction of fresh hope after despair. Fresh hope after despair. Respair. So I introduced that word to you because I feel like now is a time when perhaps we can reclaim what has been lost. We can reclaim what has been lost in our language. We can reclaim what has been lost in traditions that maybe have been long ignored or have been covered over. And I feel like the only hope that I personally find meaningful is the hope that is intimate and knows despair. Not a hope that is above despair, not a hope that is otherworldly, that is not concerned with what happens down below here on earth, but a hope that is full of knowledge of what is happening in this moment, including despair. So we light this chalice this morning to honor the opportunity for respair, to reclaim fresh hope. Something fresh, never seen, never experienced, after despair.
Please join me in reading the covenant of our church, which is in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this church,
and service,
its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. The offertory for this month is given away each month. We give to an organization that supports transformation in our community, which is the heart of our mission. In our church's historical commitment to the well-being of our community, we give 100% of the offering to those in need. UUYO's giveaway the plate recipient for September is Youngstown's area P flag. Youngstown area P flag, parents and friends of lesbians and gays, is the Youngstown chapter of P Flag International, which is the United States' first and largest organization uniting parents, families, and allies with people who are LGBTQ plus. As a former steel city in northeast Ohio, Youngstown has had no virtually organized gay community in the 1980s. Youngstown area PFLAG was founded in 1989 by Joe Bordeaux, an AIDS risk reduction specialist for the Youngstown City Health Department, as a safe space for gay men. Under the leadership of John Edwards in the early 1990s and to the present, the Youngstown chapter has expanded to support LGBT people, their family members, and friends. We are now led by Marguerite Felice, a proud mother of both a gay and a bisexual son. The Youngstown area PFLAG hosts monthly meetings for members and invited guest speakers, partners with organizations to provide education and advocacy to the sport of LGBTQ plus community, and regularly volunteers at community events to show support for our local LGBTQ plus community. This year, Youngstown area PFLAG is partnering with community organizations to register people to vote and encourage everyone to have a voting plan. We will now receive the offering that supports the life of Youngstown, Mahoning Valley, and our wider world.
Please join me in a time of silent meditation. Get into a posture that's comfortable for you. If you're sitting on the couch or wherever you are, or even lying down, just be comfortable and open your eyes or close your eyes, whatever you wish. And we're just going to share silence together for a few moments.
beginners. But we have only begun to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How could we tire of hope? So much is in bud. How can desire fail? We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy, only begun to envision how it might be to live as siblings with beast and flower, not as oppressors. Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea of non-being. Surely it cannot drag in the silt all that is innocent. Not yet, not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended. Too much hurt we have done to each other that cannot yet be forgiven. We have only begun to know the power that is in us if we would join our solitude in the commitment of struggle. So much is unfolding that might complete the gesture. So much is in bud.
I was in Los Angeles a few years ago. I was living on the opposite coast at the time in New York and yearning to visit the Pacific Ocean, the ocean that I always played in as a kid. The ocean that was grand. I believe I'm in the stars too. I believe in that connection. But I've always loved the Pacific Ocean. I've always loved an ocean that was wild and next to jagged rocks. I've always loved an ocean that was terrifying, too big, chaotic, and couldn't quite be controlled or managed. In New York, where I was living, I was studying with a Buddhist priest named Daikin. Daikin, some of you may know, he actually attended my ordination and spoke. And I knew that he had studied at a place called Zen Center, Los Angeles. And I was curious to visit this place at some point, and I was in Los Angeles, and I had the opportunity to go by Koreatown and stop by the Zen Center and just see what it was like. And when I arrived, nobody was there. It seemed like everybody was either out to lunch or maybe working or doing something else. I went there like on a Tuesday in the middle of the day, and I just saw a bench in a garden. And so I just sat there for a couple minutes, just taking in the environment, enjoying the flowers, seeing the structure of the center. And then an elderly man walked by, and he looked at me as if he'd never seen me before, which was true. And I said, hi, I'm just visiting Los Angeles, and I always wanted to see Zen Center Los Angeles because I studied with somebody who lived here at one time. And without hesitating, he said, well, I need to go to the bookstore. Why don't you come with me? So I did. I joined him. And then I saw him reach for some keys, and he unlocked a door. And he flipped on the light. And then I realized he wasn't going to the bookstore to buy a book. He actually was opening up the bookstore so people could buy books. And he said, here, have a seat if you would like. And I did. And we just started talking. I asked him about what brought him to the Zen Center. He said that he was introduced by beatniks in the 1960s. He said that he didn't understand what it was about at the time, and that he's still not quite sure, but that he loves it. And then he said that young people today are too committed for his taste. He missed the beatnik days when people took Zen a bit more casually and were exploratory. I shared a bit about my life, about how I grew up on the West Coast and how much I missed the Pacific Ocean. And the conversation just flowed. We laughed together. We just shared some, anecdotes about, what brought us to meditation and why we keep doing it and how crazy it is. And before I knew it, I glanced at my watch and I saw that I'd been there an hour and a half. And I said, well, wow, I can't believe it's been this long. I got to get going. Jennifer, my wife, was waiting for me. And so I said, well, this has been a real pleasure to talk with you. But I need to go now. And he said, well, it's been a real pleasure for me too. See you later. This memory has stuck with me years later. And I had a sense why then, but now I have even more of a keen sense why this memory stuck with me. On the surface, there really wasn't, too much that happened in this encounter. Just two people having a conversation, nothing dramatic. Nothing revelatory or anything that was something that you usually probably would tell a story about. But I remember it because of how it made me feel. I remember feeling that I could have been there for 10 minutes or for 4 hours. And I felt like we were in a conversation where neither of us really needed anything from each other. We were just talking. Whatever came to us, we were just sharing. And it just seemed so natural. And I realized that at that moment, and moments since, I've had an unspoken commitment that I've sought to keep. It's a commitment to a shared life. A shared life. As easy as two people from different generations, different backgrounds, sharing a life and feeling what that is together. I'm continually aware of how brief of a time we have, even if we're blessed with a relatively long life. I see now with more clarity and force how the days go by, especially if we're not really paying attention, and how opportunities are lost. And what seems to matter and leave an impression on me anyway, and maybe on you, are these moments of a shared life with our loved ones and family members, a shared life with strangers, with animals that we love, a shared life at a protest, a shared life at a workplace, a shared life now that we're having even virtually. These are the moments that seem to make the most difference in our lives. I think that having a shared life with those who frighten and repel us is equally important. Having a shared life with those who we're afraid of, those who have viewpoints that we find harmful and are harmful. Having a shared life with those that make us go, ugh, and want to hold them at arm's length, even without COVID. We just want them to stay at least 6 feet away. But I do think this is hard, but one of the most crucial things that we have the opportunity to practice during this time. I feel like the definition of an individual is undergoing a reimagination during this time. It used to be that what we thought of ourselves as an individual was just our personal biography, where we grew up, what schools we went to, who our parents were, what profession we chose for ourselves, our race, our gender, our sexuality. That has been our idea of what an individual is. But I think we are growing into a much larger sense of what an individual could be. And we're learning that during this time. Now we see during this pandemic that we can stay inside and isolate and follow all the health protocols to a T. But if we live in a community where a majority of those people, or even a good number, not even a majority, a good number of those people don't follow health protocols, our community will get infected anyway. So at that moment of realization, we have a choice. We can feel self-righteous that we made different choices than all those people. Or we can see that our shared life is actually our individual life, whether we like it or not. And the choices others make become our choices. And the choices that we make become other people's choices. We do have an addiction in this country that has come to define the old definition of an individual. We are addicted to seeing ourselves and being seen as innocent. We perpetuate this addiction in many ways. We continually single out individuals and say, that's not me. That person or a member of those groups, that's not me. It would make sense that we would do this. Everything in our culture up to this point is based on the addiction of seeming innocent. It makes sense. Because what do we do with guilty people? With those who are found guilty, especially if they belong to a historically oppressed group, we incarcerate them. We put people in cells. We feed them subpar food. We expose them to sickness and possible death. We deny them close relationships with loved ones and support. And then, when they get out, we stigmatize them and make it difficult for them to get a job and have a life. If we do not belong to this historically oppressed group, there are loopholes in the system to ensure our narrative of innocence, even if we're guilty. It would make sense that we would be addicted to protecting our innocence, even if prison is not the result of guilt. We live in a culture that will single out an individual and make them a pariah if they don't attempt to fall in line with the narrative of innocence. We are addicted to seeing ourselves as completely innocent, and it is doing us a lot of harm. The exception to this seems to be the way that we are engaging racism at this moment. For many decades, nobody would say they were a racist. Racist people were only individuals who were part of overt acts of racism, KKK members, etc. We lived in a time not too long ago that as long as you pretended not to see color, you were innocent. And your family, friends, and community would support you in this belief of innocence. Now there's a much more mature and humane perspective that's beginning to emerge. Now the prevailing perspective is that though I may not as an individual knowingly harbor racist sentiments, my whole life has been built and is the product of actions of racism. So I'm culpable. I play some part in all of this. It's a perspective that is beginning to expand and redefine the individual and what and who we are accountable to. Along with this realization of being culpable in a culture that disgusts many of us, there is a certain fragility that has emerged. It's often called white fragility, but I think there are many different kinds of fragility. The root of this fragility, the root, is the outdated version of the individual that we are still trying to live out, even though it doesn't make sense anymore. It's very fragile to hold the narrative that I'm an individual who made personal choices that were mostly innocent and good, and all these other bad people did really bad things I find reprehensible, and that has nothing to do with me. This is a very fragile perspective, and that fragility means it's time for a new definition of an individual. The new individual today has the opportunity to see what is happening in the collective, in the culture, in the society, is part of my individuality. It is easy, for instance, to say, I don't believe in violence. I don't believe in murder. I don't believe in racism. I don't believe in oppression. Right now, we have the opportunity to say, absolutely, there are things happening now that we find reprehensible and that we should do something about. But those things are not happening outside of me. My whole life is a product of violence, murder, racism, and oppression. It's a different impact for each individual. But I would not have the life I have today without those things. The city I live in would not have been built the schools I attended, the neighborhoods I've lived in, the opportunities I've had, the definition of success that I've inherited. All of this relates to things that we find reprehensible. Of course, this doesn't mean that everything is completely bad. That would be an overstatement. There are wonderful and beautiful things about all aspects of our life. Where we live, the memories of our city, our coworkers, the lives we built. All of this is incredibly beautiful. It's just not completely innocent. According to an outmoded view of the individual, this should just make us feel bad. It would make us feel fragile. But there is another aspect to this new individual that is emerging at this moment that is very important in facing all the ways that we participate in what we find reprehensible. And it's this: in facing the truth of our lives, including the truth of how we are connected to everything that's happening right now, including things we find reprehensible, we can finally have the opportunity to begin again. This understanding of beginning offsets the fragility. It gives us somewhere to go rather than just feeling bad about ourselves. We see that in facing the lack of innocence is an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity for a new beginning, where we can see with new eyes a fresh hope that has maybe never emerged until this moment. We move away from seeing lack of innocence as a prison sentence or a recipe for becoming a pariah or a reason just to feel bad about ourselves, but rather the lack of innocence and seeing it clearly and understanding our connection to it as a recipe for becoming a real mature person. According to the Jewish calendar, this weekend is Rosh Hashanah, where according to Torah, God begins to create the world again. It's a new beginning. I feel it in my bones this year. I read the Bible regularly, and most people I speak with about the Bible usually say that the First Testament is the hardest to read. They said, "How could you read all that? It's full of violence, contradiction, and sacrifice. It's a story, and it's story after story about God telling the people to act in a certain way if they want to save themselves. And then the people do the opposite. And then they try to trick God to pretend that they didn't do anything wrong. And then, when there's nowhere left to turn, the people finally admit what they've done, and it wasn't what they were supposed to do. And there is atonement, a new beginning. I love it. I love these stories. When I look around at the world that we're in, especially at this moment, I see the truth in these writings. An honest look at the struggle of being human and not doing what we know to be right. For those who are not religious, terms like atonement can feel kind of archaic, optional, like a matter of belief. But I don't think we have that luxury anymore. The root of atonement is to be at one with. Being atoned or at one, understanding our connection in this shared life, is not just for the Jewish people. It's not just for those who attend church on Sunday or any other day. It's for all people who want to become a true individual. Many have a theory that our country is divided right now. I think that we are only divided in our mind. We are united through our shared actions and our shared life together, whether we like it or not, whether we like those actions or not. We are united. And if we don't like it, we don't like what is happening, we don't like the actions that we're seeing, it's very important that we pay attention to this. It's very, very important that we pay attention to this. It's really important that we don't deflect and say, this has nothing to do with me, but to look more deeply and see how what is happening is indeed our life. All these actions are making our life and giving us the opportunity for an individual healing response at this moment. A new beginning. Not all of the actions we're seeing are harmful. There's a lot of healing happening right now. Those who are caring for the sick, the needy, the disenfranchised. The world and our country are full of people looking out for the best interests of their families and their communities. All of this is also us, if we have the ability to access it. I feel so grateful to be alive during the new creation of the individual that is now beginning to emerge. It begins with fragility, but it leads in time to a stable maturity. We can stop pretending that we and those we identify with are always good, and those we disagree with and find reprehensible are always bad. We can move out of this simplistic view into something more real and more satisfying. We can see that we are all part of a shared life, and that shared life is various and full of goodness and full of actions that we find harmful. We are moving toward the opportunity to hold a person accountable for their actions, while understanding that we all play some part in forming a new beginning together. Please pray with me. Spirit of love, we are grateful for the opportunity to be alive in this moment. We are grateful for the opportunity to feel our breath, the ability to have our senses, including our conscience. We are grateful for the ways that we are able to connect to each other virtually during this time and support those who are vulnerable, those who are grieving, and those who are hurting. Please help us to be an instrument of healing during this time. Amen. extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts until we meet again. As you depart, please remember the one great fact. You are loved and never truly alone.